that's playing in the tournament?
I guess it's San Diego State, but I'm not seeing. I'm watching Princeton and Arizona right now.
So how many games are concurrent? Do all the regions?
16 today, 16 tomorrow.
Yeah, but that's not what I asked. So right now, as we speak, how many are concurrent?
I think there's 4.
Okay, that's what I wondered, because I've got Alabama, Texas A&M on in the background. And,
Right.
1 versus 16, not a real, and it's not close. I mean, it's a blowout. And it looks like Furman. Wow, that was close. Furman and UVA.
And I watched the end of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. Actually, I always like rooting for the underdogs in this tournament. So, to me, anytime a higher seed gets upset, that makes me happy. Unless it's my team that's getting upset. And this year, I have no dog in the fight or cat in the fight, unless you want to count Arizona.
Did they ever explain? And so his dog that would be in the fight is Dayton, and Dayton is not in. Did they ever explain why they didn't accept the bid? I mean, I know that North Carolina just said, "Hey, we're too busy. We don't have," or something.
They did make a statement, and it was primarily that everybody's injured, and we just don't have enough. We just don't have enough horses to continue the season. We need to take a step back, get healthy, and getting healthy may include replacing this coaching. So we'll see.
So they have any?
If that happens, they lose all their players too.
Does Dayton have any draft picks potentially?
They have 2 that are potential. One of them is graduating senior, but has a year of eligibility left. And the other is only a sophomore who has 2 more years. And both are big candidates for the transfer portal. If they go, it's going to be years before I care about Dayton basketball again.
Yeah, and we're not going to talk about sports much more here because it's not a sports related podcast, but
well, I thought that's why you invited me.
Yeah. By the way, you are amazingly tan, my friend, and looks very good. So.
Well, thank you. And the white beard doesn't hurt, showing off the tan. I've been on the golf course a lot.
Yeah. Now you made me forget my question. This is again basketball related. Is it your opinion that this whole modification and the portal situation is going to harm college basketball or be neutral or help?
Well, I mean, if you want equality, then the transfer portal is not the answer. The transfer portal is going to allow the rich to keep getting richer and the poor to get less as time goes on. So the cream's going to rise to the top where the programs are large enough that they can offer more and more exposure, more chances to get into the NBA, now they're getting paid for different advertising opportunities. And so the bigger the program from a national perspective, not from a local perspective. Dayton's right on the edge. Dayton is one of those teams where they've got great tradition. They got a great stadium. They have the first 4 there every year because the community supports college basketball. But there's something lacking. They're just not able to get it to the point where they're the Gonzaga. They're trying to be the Gonzaga of the East, where they just keep rebooting every year, especially with international players, and puts them, in the top 25. And if they're in the top 25, they're in the NCAA tournament. Lots of good things will happen. They almost got there, and then COVID kind of pricked the balloon, and they've been fighting the uphill battle ever since.
Who is the most notable Dayton alumni that played in the NBA?
Well, Obi Toppin is in the NBA right now, and he was the number 5 or 8 draft choice after the 2020 season. Won National Play of the Year. Your coach won National Coach of the Year. That was the year. And they were primed to be a number 1 seed in the NCAA, and then they canceled the whole season. And it reminds me of 2008. You and I were both in the real estate business at the time. And the people that got hurt in 2008, and the geographical areas in particular, Tucson, where I live, being one of the most notable, didn't really recover for a good decade. And you could look at it today and say it's recovered, but I would argue that it never really did. So kind of see the same thing in basketball, where what happened to Dayton in 2000.
Mark, I don't think you should be showing what you're showing, honestly. So let's leave it for stuff that's, thanks. Okay, I don't really want my personal email being shown up on a webinar. So,
Start over.
yeah. All right. Let's get to the whole point of this, which is to talk about environmental or ecological types of issues. And last week we spent some time talking about AI and how we might be able to use AI to benefit us as in our analysis and our handling of issues. And I'm finding more and more, unless Google gets on board and figures out how it can use a better algorithm when you do searches for certain things to educate the people that are doing the searches, it's going to lose out to this whole AI process that's going on, because the companies that are putting their eggs in that basket right now are doing a great job. Because I'm going to show you something right here. Mark, would you give me the screen, or do I have to take it? Can you give it to me?
You see that AI passed I thought it was a bar exam. It wasn't. It was a law school exam at the University of Minnesota, University of Wisconsin, one or the other.
Wow. So, Mark, which of my screens, usually it gives me an option to choose the screen, and I'm not, which is it? Is it showing what is Chat GPT? Here. Oh, okay. I don't want that one. I never quite figure out how I choose the screen here. So let me go to sharing. Which screen? Screen monitor one. Let's see if it's that one. Not there. Does that show some Chat GPT wording here?
Yeah, you got it.
Yeah, this is what I wanted. So this is a search that I just did in the last hour to sort of prep for this call. And it's all related to the chemical group called PFAS. This right here, you're seeing PFAS. And the reason that I wanted to do this today is yesterday, the director of the US EPA stated that there is going to be introduced into the Congress a bill to basically ban PFAS usage and to essentially do with it what was done back in the early 90s with asbestos. So to make it something that would be eliminated from use in any kind of manufacturing process. And the first step in that process is something that doesn't require any kind of legislative efforts. And so the other thing that the EPA director did was actually put in place something that I'm assuming was an executive order or something that he had the authority to do himself, which is to create federal regulations for what level of PFAS could be allowed in drinking water. Which, by the way, that's a controversial issue. The ability of the US to regulate local drinking water has always been something that's been very touchy. And it's likely it will eventually end up in a court challenge, probably multiple court challenges. But in the past, and asbestos is a great example of it, when asbestos began to get regulated and people started to get concerned about asbestos, a lot occurred in the late 80s. It was first local authorities that placed bans in place. It was followed by states that put bans in place. And ultimately, it did end up with there being a federal ban that occurred. In this case, with PFAS, that hasn't happened. There are only a couple of states that have any kind of regulations for PFAS at this point. And now the feds are coming in and saying, we're going to put federal regulations in place. I'm a little worried this is totalitarianism that we're seeing in a big way. And it's reaching into the environmental realm specifically. So who would you guess are the two biggest companies that use PFAS in their manufacturing? Either the audience or Mark or Bob. And this is not a topic I expect anybody to know a whole heck of a lot about.
Well, it seems like a chemical company would be Monsanto and Dow, to name two.
You got them. Those are the two largest.
Okay.
Monsanto, and Monsanto has used it in all kinds of different purposes. And Dow has also in a number of different purposes. What would you guess the total amount of litigations that have either been settled or adjudicated and awards been made to plaintiffs in the entirety of cases related to asbestos through the years?
Asbestos, okay. I'm thinking PFAS, okay.
We're gonna go there. We'll go to PFAS in a second.
So you're saying asbestos-related claim or payments to damages to plaintiffs,
Correct.
right? Billions, I assume, but I don't know for sure.
Put 3 zeros on that.
300 billion?
Another zero.
Trillion.
Yep, $3 trillion.
Jesus. Okay.
It put over
They
1,000.
never got immunity, huh? Not like the pharmaceutical companies.
No, they never got immunity. It put over 1,000 businesses out of business.
Yeah.
And many of the largest, Johns Manville probably being the largest, went into Chapter 11 and was able to continue their business because they had diversified into some other products. But frankly, they were really only just bailed out by the feds, or they would have been out of business. So do you think that something with PFAS could put Dow or Monsanto out of business?
Not a chance.
Not a chance. Not a chance. And that. So now let's go to PFAS. The litigations related to PFAS have literally only occurred probably since about 2010. And if you go on Google and you try to do some research and figure out what that number might be, you won't find it. I mean, they're,
Okay, so hang on a second. I mean, I know you guys talked about it last week, but I wasn't here. So can you explain what it is and what products are they use it in manufacturing? And then if you can, what are the hazards? So it'll help me understand where the future lies.
yeah. So PFAS is a little bit like asbestos. Let me back up a step. PFAS is a group of chemicals of which, and I'm not going to go into the scientific name of them, but that it's a wide group that includes two main chemicals, PFOS spelled with an S, so not AS, and PFOA, PFOA, those two. And they have been used in a whole wide variety of manufacturing uses. The biggest ones, the biggest uses have been fire retardants. And we're talking about fire retardants as coatings on garments. That's where 3M has the patents for a number of different uses. By the way, the patents for most of the PFAS chemicals are still in place. They're not old patents like patents for asbestos would have been. So it's a relatively new, they were only first started to be used in the 40s, where asbestos was used back into the 1800s. Okay, so much longer and older set of products. So they're used as fire retardants is probably the main one. A big place they were used as fire retardants that has caused problems is on runways, and where they were just broadly sprayed, and they have then contaminated soils and water and such because of their broad use in that circumstance. Until 2006, DuPont and Dow, because they both were involved in this, used them for the manufacturing of Teflon, which is a coating on just about every kind of pot and pan you can imagine worldwide. And
it became widely known that Teflon was not not good to cook with Teflon.
Yeah, there have been known medical issues related to Teflon's use for years.
Right.
They were used for, PFAS were really good chemicals to be used for water resistance also. So they're used for flame resistance, so fire retardant and resistance, but also for waterproofing. So Gore-Tex is still today made using PFAS.
So what's the hazard?
Okay, so all kinds of respiratory ailments. It's actually not one where cancers have been directly related to it.
Okay.
There are a number of intestinal issues. It's been mainly not chronic, but acute diseases, things that occur as a single event. And they've been pretty dramatic. And like asbestos, it's fairly easy to relate them through the chemistry of the body. What you would see when you did chemical analysis, when one of these things were to happen, is if you'd see elevated levels in the body.
Does it have a dissipation factor to it, or once you get it, you can't get rid of it?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
It is accumulated by human beings. It's accumulated by almost all kinds of animals, and it lasts forever.
Not even a half-life, huh?
And it's actually called, the sort of generic name for it, in a negative sense, is it's called the forever chemical. And so once we get it in our bodies, and we've all got it, by the way, we all have levels of it to some extent, we don't regulate it. Unlike things like heavy metals, lead, chromium, copper, all those, our bodies regulate those. So we could have illnesses that occur because of them, and we do, but eventually if we don't get some kind of a medical issue from them, our bodies will get rid of them. And that's a good thing, but that's not the case with these PFAS chemicals.
So besides Teflon and Gore-Tex, are there any other notable products that we all come in contact with?
Yeah, and here's the list. So we've just already talked about nonstick cookware, so Teflon, food packaging, and it's still used in food packaging, where again it has been phased out for the most part in cookware, so nonstick cookware. But food packaging, it's still in it. So grease-resistant food packaging, such as fast food wrappers, microwave bags, pizza boxes, they all still have them in it.
Pizza box. Okay.
Stain-resistant carpets and upholstery, they're used to be in, it's put in it to get stain resistant and water repellents for them. Waterproof clothing and outdoor gear, we've talked about that.
Right.
Fire foam, we've talked about that. They're used in a number of different, just broadly industrial processes, such as the production of fluoropolymers. This is getting a little technically detailed. Electronics, aviation and automotive parts, and surfactants.
Electronics.
Yeah, and surfactants are things that make water wetter. So water, when it's in its just pure form, this is the best way to describe it, when it lands on a surface, it will ball up, it'll create a droplet.
Right.
And it at a certain size, so its density, if it gets bigger, it spreads. So that's why when it first starts to rain or you wash your car, you'll see droplets. But then as the coating of water gets thicker, the droplets go away. When something has a higher level of surfactant in it, surfactants make it to where those bubbles can get bigger before they spread out. So it makes water wetter, they say. So that's what the use of surfactant.
Way of looking at it, all right.
Well, because those droplets are taken up by plants when the water hits them easier than a flood of water is.
Right. Okay.
And that's why a rainstorm that is just steady will actually provide a lot more value from an agricultural perspective than a flood of water.
Yeah.
And then lastly, personal care products. So dental floss, shampoo, cosmetic. I mean, it's everywhere, Bob. It is really an everywhere kind of chemical. So I did a search and I had to push to get this done, but you could not find it on Google. And that is, what level of suits have already been adjudicated or settled? It's close to 100 billion already for this case.
It obviously has a negative impact on people in order to have that kind of an award.
Yeah, and it's going to eventually exceed asbestos. It's going to be huge. So the other question is, how much is it going to cost to eliminate the use?
Uncalculable.
Uncalculable, and that's I think an accurate way to state it, because if Dow continues to use it, Monsanto continues to use it, or anybody, any of these large manufacturers, you can't calculate it because there may not be a substitute. They may have to just not be making things. Do you think we're ever going to eliminate everything? That was the positive about asbestos. There's a negative and a positive. We were able to develop other products that could be used in place of asbestos.
Mm-hmm.
So insulation is the biggest one. That's where John Manville was.
Right.
John Manville made all kinds of insulative products, including asbestos. Well, guess what? They had already transitioned out of asbestos before anybody started to see that it was a problem. And what did they start to make? What did Manville begin to make? fiberglass as insulation. So they just figured it out and moved away from it. Well, it appears that Dow has done that. It appears Dow's not using PFAS as much any longer, and they've made the move. It's the small and quote the smaller companies, the multi-billion-dollar companies that won't make the move out. They won't be able to.
So, but going back to the products that it's in, the personal care products is the place where the majority of the risk would be. How many people wear Gore-Tex? I play golf and I've had Gore-Tex rainwear. I hated it because it makes me feel like I'm in a sweatshop, so I never wear it anymore. Teflon frying pans, you already said those have been phased out. When you get into the personal care products, now you got to do dental floss. Seriously? Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't get any more intimate than that, I don't think.
Well, anyway, bottom line, I use it right now because it's probably the biggest non-newsworthy. How many of you have even heard of that this occurred this week, that this regulatory circumstance, which, by the way, it's estimated that for municipal drinking water supplies to now have to test and eliminate PFAS in their systems down to what the level that the current regulations are going to set out will be, is going to cost more than $2 to $3 trillion also. So getting rid of some of these things is not going to be, we're just using PFAS as an example. We use two different environmental issues today, asbestos and PFAS.
Yeah.
And so it's a very interesting and big issue that's not getting much press. Why? It's not as exciting as something like, what would you say, Bob? You're a lay person who does follow issues. What's the big environmental issue you've heard about this week or the last couple of weeks? And there's one that's probably way above others.
I don't remember the chemicals, but the big train spill in East Palestine, Ohio.
That one's been there for a while, and it's dioxin that is the big one there. And dioxin's bad, really a bad element.
Yeah.
Another one that more recently has gotten lots of press, pretty controversial, and it's very partisan. So I don't think there's anything partisan about that train spill. I mean, I don't think anybody would say we ought to tolerate those. We shouldn't really worry about stopping, different kinds of derailments and such. But this other one that's out there, probably the biggest issue right now, is very partisan.
I can't think.
Oil development in the Arctic, up in the Arctic slope area.
Oh, I'm unaware of the dialogue on that one.
Yeah, Biden actually approved this week, much to the dismay of a huge amount of his constituency, a ExxonMobil oil area offshore off the coast of Alaska. At the same time, he stopped another one. So he kind of argued, well, I did one, but I didn't do the other. Well, the point is, the other one was done for some nondescript oil entity, and the one he allowed is for ExxonMobil, the biggest petroleum company in the world. So let's
follow the money. That's all I can say.
Yeah, follow the money, and again, that's what probably got the most press this week. But what's interesting is the chemical entities in petroleum, raw petroleum, as it comes out of the ground, that will cause environmental and ecological problems that would cause human health issues, are benign as it compares to this PFAS issue that we just discussed. I mean, yeah. I'm not saying there aren't any issues, there really are, but they can be more dealt with. It's highly regulated by our body. Any kind of a petroleum input, if you were to drink motor oil, it frankly, and Bob's girlfriend is a physician, but you ought to ask her sometime asked Julie sometime what, if you drank a bottle of motor oil, how likely would it be that the doctors could get you fixed up? It actually is really likely. I mean, it's not like it's going to kill you, and it's not going to have long-term effects. I mean, they're going to pump your stomach, they're going to do it. And I'm not downplaying the negativity of petroleum, but it's nothing like this PFAS issue or asbestos. And
Well,
yet,
it's interesting how long it's flown under the radar if there's already been $100 billion in claims against it.
yeah. And that's the ones that have been reported, Bob. As you know, many claims are confidential, many settlements are confidential, and so we don't even know the numbers as it relates to those. But again, we didn't really talk about PFAS last week. So actually, you were not.
Okay.
That was the issue of the week. It really, there was nothing in the press last week about PFAS. In the last week, it was the Palestine, Ohio train.
So go back to your comment about the totalitarianism, because I'm curious if you're believing this is overreach by the regulators, despite the fact, I don't know, you said that, I think I understood when you said that you meant this.
No, I actually don't. I didn't mean that as it relates to PFAS. I actually think it is overreach by the regulators to have put in place this testing requirement and this amount that they're requiring drinking water suppliers to meet. I think that is overreach because I don't think we have the research in place like we had for asbestos. That's why I use the two as an analogy. Analogous.
Well, so I've told you this, but I'll tell the audience that probably the last 2.5 years now, I switched to alkaline water. And it was bottled water in the beginning, and then I found 2 places where I can actually go have them take distilled filter tap water to take out the ingredients that are harmful. Now, I never heard of PFAS till today, so I'll find that out. But I know that I'm in Tucson right now, and I go to Oregon during the summer. Both have places for me to get that kind of water. And from a health standpoint, a cancer lives in acidic conditions, not in alkaline conditions. And that's not the reason I do it. I do it because it makes my hair start turning back to its normal color more than anything else. So no vanity on my part, but it does make me feel better. And then recently there was some information in the news about some chemicals that were in the Tucson water supply that were really an issue. And so last time I went to get filled up, I asked them about it and said, well, number one, we're not on the Tucson water supply. We're in Northwest Pima County water supply, which is pure. It's all mountain. It's all well-fed water. And yes, they take all of that stuff out. I'll now drill down on the PFAS and report back and see whether or not these filtration systems can reduce it. And if that's the case, then they already exist if you know how to find them.
Oh, they absolutely can. And again, real quickly, we don't go into detail on this, but there's broadly 3 kinds of home-based water treatment systems. And those 3 types are just small versions of what the municipal water treatment facilities use. They just have much bigger versions of these 3. The simplest of those, which is the cheapest that you can buy and use, is activated carbon. So it's a device, a filter you put on your system, and the water goes through it, and it does clean it. I mean, it will eliminate. And actually, it would do a pretty good job of removing this PFAS material. Mm-hmm. The next level up is called deionization. So you can actually, in the grocery store, usually you can get distilled water and you can get deionized water. And deionized water would be a little more expensive than distilled. Distilled water, by the way, is just boiling water and letting the vapor that comes off of it go back and become water again as it cools, and it'll eliminate a lot of the contaminants by doing that. But distilling is not considered a water treatment method. So when you drink distilled water, don't get the belief that you're drinking something that's really clean. It could still have some, it could certainly have this PFAS in it. So
Yeah.
back to the treatment methods. In your home, you could have activated carbon. You could have deionization, a lot more expensive, probably 5x of what carbon filtration would be. And it will eliminate the same kinds of organic chemicals, things like PFAS, but it will also eliminate things like metals, which our activated carbon wouldn't eliminate, for example. So if you've got any kind of a lead problem, which they had in Flint, Michigan, the water problems there from lead in the water, an activated carbon system would not remove that. A deionization system would. So you'll see deionization systems that can go under counter. They're run by 110 Electric, and they literally use a combination of chemical means and physical means to deal with the water. The highest level is what's called reverse osmosis. That's the way that you get water that is used in chip manufacturing, for example, where you need just ultra clean water. Off the charts expensive, not often found in home systems, but very wealthy people do have it. So Bob Hope used to talk about its value. The whole process of making water alkaline versus not even thinking about its pH or its alkalinity level is a relatively new process and considered, and is a little controversial. We could have our own full discussion of that. I would be in the same camp as Bob about how beneficial it could be, but there's actually some pretty good scientific arguments about why it's not necessarily that beneficial, and maybe not worth what you might be paying to get it, for example. But back to the typical kinds of filtrate or water cleaning. Now, you will never see reverse osmosis in a municipal system. You will never see even any high level of deionization. It's almost all going to be the carbon type filtration, and then just putting water into the air and letting the air strip things out of it. So it's kind of like a cheap version of distillation.
Hmm.
That's what municipal water treatment systems use.
Well, 4 months ago, I decided I was going to put a filtration system into my house. And let's just say, without getting into all the gory details, the price every time you wanted to go up in level to get the desired result. And I wasn't looking for a point. Everything, the inexpensive was all one point in the house, one tap. I was looking for a whole house solution.
Right.
When I did the math, it was going to cost $3,000-4,000 to put one in to do the whole house.
Yeah.
And it cost me $1 a gallon to take my 6-gallon, 3-gallon jugs down there, and it lasts me a week and a half or 2 weeks. It's not worth the effort, or not worth the money to put it in a whole house solution.
And that's why the whole house treatment has not gone where people believed that it would go. And I was one of those. Back in the 80s, if I would have had the money to bet on it at that point, buy stock or whatever, I would have bought into house-wide water treatment systems, and I would have been wrong.
Yeah.
Because what has occurred, and you're dealing with it, is bottled water. And we're just dealing at a little different, higher level. But most people today that don't drink tap water drink Aquafina or Desante or whatever version of bottled water. That's what has won over the years, and it's mainly because it's cheaper. It's way cheaper than a house treatment system would be.
Right.
So this is all relevant, by the way, everybody, as it relates to this PFAS discussion, because PFAS probably to the levels that they just set regulatory values for could not be eliminated with something as simple as activated carbon. It would be that $3,000 system that Bob described that you'd have to have in your home to get the levels down to what they're saying that they need to be, because I don't think you could even think about affording them at the municipal level at all. I don't think it can happen at that level. That's how much more expensive it's going to be.
Well, the other issue that you bring up is whether or not the federal government can preempt state regulation in any area, and isn't the state
Yes.
the primary?
Yes.
So I think that's one of the ongoing debates that we're having throughout this country right now, is the role of the federal government in our lives. And when you mention totalitarianism, that's the issue in and of itself, where the few rule over the many.
I'm going to bring up one more issue for our thought, and Bob, we can both put it in the back of our heads to maybe talk about next week. But
Yeah.
let's just perk some interest here. And that's, what are any of you crypto investors out there? So I'm asking the question broadly. If you are, what have you seen happen with Bitcoin over the last week? It's gone up considerably, 30% over the last week. Because guess what? The banks that failed over the last week are most heavily, what is their largest depositors? What industry are they in? Crypto, but not Bitcoin. All the other forms of cryptocurrency.
Well,
So
I don't think that's what it was really. It was that the crypto companies had their assets with those banks.
Yes. Oh no, that's what I'm saying. No,
Yeah.
they did. But look at the value. Here's what's happened this week, Bob. Bitcoin's gone up. Everything else has not just gone down, it's crashed. Because it's now being more and more discussed. Here's the topic for discussion. That if we go to some kind of a cryptocurrency as a true means of exchange, currency exchange, it is looking more and more like it could be Bitcoin, where they didn't think it would previously. And I think there must be something the feds have figured out that they can control related to Bitcoin. That's where, again, the totalitarianism discussion comes into play. Bitcoin's gone up where everything else has gone down.
Well, there are a couple that aren't crashing, so besides Bitcoin, which I think are really going to be the survivors. So we'll see.
Well, that would be great if that's the case, but not many. Most of Ethereum's gone in the toilet over the last.
Well, the problem with Bitcoin is that it's a work product based.
Yeah, it is. It's
Crypto coin, and so therefore it's got a limited viability in the big picture, whereas XLM and XRP are are assets that are used for payment systems. And those payment systems, I think Elon Musk's going to have a big impact on payment systems with his purchase of Twitter, because I think that's his ultimate goal, is to turn Twitter into a payment system. The combine basically Twitter with PayPal-ish functions. A lot to be said on that whole topic, so we could fill a couple hours.
Yeah. Well, the reason I bring it up, just broadly, this banking situation and the failures and so on, is there are some environmental related impacts, and even this whole PFAS issue, I think, and the whole totalitarianism of federal regulations is going to affect. So it's a topic for future discussion, not for today. I do want to end today. We just got
trying to make so let's look at this from the standpoint of top-down governmental interference or regulation. I don't call it interference, but even I believe it is in many cases. But on the other hand, the government is doing things with chemicals to further a climate agenda that I think are having a negative impact on people. And I'm specifically relating to chemtrails. And I don't want to get into a great big discussion on this topic, but if they're interested in our health on one level and not interested in our health on another level, what exactly is going on?
Yeah, and I apologize because you mentioned at the start you had one issue in specific you wanted to talk about that was, and is it the chemtrails, Bob? And you and I have talked about chemtrails.
Yeah, it is. Okay. And I see it every day. We just lost Wayne.
Yeah, I accidentally hit my system every once in a while tells me that that it's running too slow, and the way I could speed it up is to turn off my webcam, and I didn't want to turn it off, but
the sharing might have something to do with it too. So I may turn the sharing off. I don't think anybody can see that anyway.
Why don't we turn it off, Mark? Yeah, I should have mentioned it, Bob. I did want, before you do though, I do want to say this. Look at how much data in less than an hour, guys, that I got about PFAS we're going to turn into an EAT blog article. Look at all this. I'm just going to scroll before you turn it off, Mark. And this is great information, Bob. It's accurate. Now, the negative is people need to understand that this whole AI, open AI, is only using data up until September of 2021. So anything that's more recent, it doesn't use. All right, just everybody should understand that. And so anyway, which PFAS and the more recent things that are going on with it would mean that you're really not going to get as accurate of information about it unless you're using some other sources. But look at how much great information. Here's all this about these settlements, Bob. So this is 4 cases, and it gives me all the data on them. And if I were to do a Google search to try to find just what's here in this 4 different case information, it'd take me hours, and I'd get all kinds of fake or inappropriate stuff before I found the right things. Here are 10 more cases that have not yet been settled or adjudicated.
As of 2021.
As of 2021. That's right. It's only accurate up until that 2021 date. Now, here's what I can do, and I haven't done this yet, is I could then go in and do a Google search of the Cottage Grove, Minnesota, so it'd be Cottage Grove, Minnesota v. 3M. So they sued 3M. And you could then see by using more recent data that's available, and this is just publicly available data about where that case is, whether it's been settled or not. But my main statement is, and then the new version of OpenAI, which is now ChatGPT 4.0, less than a month ago, it was 3.0. Now gives all kinds of math. This is what was really cool. It gave me all these cases, and it gave me which ones have been settled or adjudicated by September. And then I just asked it to do the math and tell me what the total amount was. And this is the 1.730 billion based on these current cases that I just had gotten. I mean, it's just something that it did for me that I would have spent a half an hour or more, but it did in 10 seconds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty shocking how fast it is.
Yeah, and I then I asked it to change directions and started to look at another chemical that I deal with a lot in these brownfield sites, which is called TCE, trichloroethylene. And trichloroethylene is a known carcinogen, and it's present in a lot of drinking water circumstances. And I tried to get it to tell me what the litigation amount had been for it, and so far it hasn't done it. And all I'm learning is I'm going to get it, but you got to know how to ask it questions in the right sort of way. And I haven't gotten that yet, and I'm going to get there next. I didn't have time. Thought I'd finish this before we started, but
Who's behind ChatGPT?
Elon Musk.
This is Musk. Okay.
Well, and a couple of other Silicon Valley guys that I just don't follow those guys' names. If I had them right here, and if one of our audience wants to weigh in on that, and Mark, you might just look that up. Do a Google search real quick while we're continuing to talk here, and weigh in with who were. I think there's 3 guys that were the developer of ChatGPT. Musk and 2 others.
That sounds like a rib.
So no, that was Mark. So Mark, would you turn my webcam on? I mean, just put it back to where we're just done webcams and no sharing. Bob, by the way, I'll talk about this next week some, but I bought a new program, not new to me, it's not new, but it hasn't been out that long, called Designer, so the word design with 2 R's behind it, that will put together an ebook for you with all the needed, the cover pages, the in page. It'll do all the work where you just have to give it content for $27.
Okay.
One time.
I already wrote the first draft of the what is Chi Golf book using ChatGPT, but it's kind of redundant. It has a lot of repeating stuff in it, so it needs to be edited out. But yeah, between
once you edit that out,
yeah.
So what Designer doesn't do is it doesn't provide content.
Right.
So if you take that content, you put it into Designer, and it'll then make the whole book for you.
Cool. And then you can put it on.
Yeah, you put it on Kindle.
On Amazon and sell it as an ebook.
Yep.
Yeah.
So Mark, is it start webcams now again?
You can shut it off sharing, I think, up top, right? There you go.
Yeah, it's off.
Yeah.
All right. But we've got about 7 minutes left here, everybody. If you've got questions for us, throw them in. Again, the vast majority of watching of this will come from replays, so it's not going to be, there's a question for all of everybody. If you've got some way that you can get questions that can be easily gotten back to our speakers when people watch their replays and they get questions, I'd really like to know what that is. Interestingly, Webinar Jam does it, Bob, which is one of the tools that we bought years ago and haven't used much.
Right.
Webinar Jam will take questions because it has what it calls an evergreen product, where a webinar is essentially always on, or it's not always, but it gets scheduled like 5 times a day that you schedule it. And when you get questions from that, if you just give it an email address, it'll send them on to you. And Mark and Ariba and I have talked about going back to Webinar Jam and leaving GoToWebinar for that reason, but we haven't done it. So let's talk about Chi Golf for a little. I don't see any other questions coming in here. By the way, Alicia, thank you so much. Alicia always puts in lots of cool comments, and she did that. She puts good sources for us, and okay. Oh, I'd love to do one. Alicia. I don't know any experts in that area. Do you, Bob? I just, that's
I
not
didn't
something.
hear what Mark said, so I'm sorry.
Oh, Fibonacci's numbers. And there are some not just quirks or quacks out there who firmly believe that Fibonacci sequences can predict what's going on in current time and into the future, which actually going to lead me to one last thing that I'd at least like to bring up, because I'm going to go see it tonight. I think you all know that I have some spirituality in my life, and I'm not at all shy about that. And it, you know, and I have high respect for anyone and that has spirituality in their lives, and Mark and Arib both do, and others of our staff do. And frankly, I'm not at all biased against or for even directly all of the wide varieties of different spirituality. But I am biased towards the fact that we didn't just end up here by some random chance. And that's, to me, what spirituality involves, is that there is something out there, something that is bigger than us, that has some control over what we are and what we do. So that could be a whole wide variety. So Hindus have a certain series of beliefs, and Muslims have another, and Christians have another, and even you could break Christianity into smaller groups and say that Catholics might have another. I mean, there's all just different kinds. Indians in South America have their own spirituality, and native peoples in lots of places in the world that have been there for thousands and thousands of years have got their own spiritualities. And I think all of them have some relevance. But anyway, I bring it up only because Bob just watched a movie recently, and I'm going to go watch it tonight, Bob. So Deb and I are going to the theaters.
I've seen it 3 times now.
To watch a movie called The Jesus Revolution, which is based on a true story from the 1980s, correct, Bob? I mean,
it's late 60s, early 70s.
Oh, late 60s, early 70s, yes. So anyway,
I mean, the churches that were involved lasted forever, but the revolution occurred. The anti-drug movement towards God. I mean, everyone was searching for God, and drugs were not the answer.
Yeah. Anyway, that was the late 60s, early 70s.
So I've told a series of people about this. I told you that I saw it, really had an impact on me, and my spirituality is reemerging. And then went to California just to be with my son, to take him to see it. He then took 10 or 12 people to it. I told the story to some of my friends when I got back in Tucson, and they wanted to go see it, and we went to see it with them last night. So I've seen it 3 times right now, and it's starting to lose its momentum. And so if anybody out there wants to see the movie, I would suggest you don't wait, because it may not be in theater very much longer. And in the theater, it's a different experience than watching it at home on Netflix.
Yeah. By the way, this is relevant to Alicia's question. So she says, some people think that the Fibonacci code is God's fingerprint. Any thoughts? I'm one of those that thinks it might be, Alicia, and I think that's very controversial. But Bob, you maybe never have even heard of it, but you ought to check that out at some point.
But you know, my better half over here is more plugged in than I am, so I'm sure she knows all about this stuff. So I'll quiz her on it when we're done here.
Yeah, it's interesting. But so my thoughts are on it. It's actually worthy of a webinar, Alicia. I'd love to have someone who is an expert come and talk with us about it. So if you know anybody, or if anybody in our audience does, that'd be great.
So you started with Cheek Golf, and I just wanted to say that
yes, please talk about Cheek Golf.
This is a quick one, all right? This all started with tapping into the energy of the universe, and through Qigong and other practices that allow you to move energy around your body, heal yourself, and to be able to swing a golf club using that energy. And it became kind of an evolution towards spirituality for me. And my son saw it before I did. And he was really an advocate for me getting in touch with it. And I grew up with a very classical Catholic upbringing and very dogma related, very structured, and I rebelled against it. I was part of that generation, 68 to 72, that rejected all that stuff. And so for me, it was, I'm spiritual, I have morals, that's all I really need. And through this movie, it's kind of gotten us on the same page a little bit. He's a little bit further along than I am. I'm moving in the right direction. And it comes at a time in our culture that it's a message that those who need it, it's available to them. And so you and I have been talking about how the pendulum is swinging, and we both have seen that the missing ingredient in life is God, and the spirituality, the morals that come along with it, that a lot of people have kind of abandoned. And that's one of the reasons why I think we have the strife that we do, because the things that are important where we agree have become difficult to find because of the divisiveness of the political rhetoric that's out there. So all in all I want to say is go see the movie, because you can't walk away from that movie without feeling hope and faith are the salvation.
Awesome. Alicia, thank you so much for your questions. And as it relates to, she asked if we could bring Joe Piniella back. And we've lost a little bit of touch with Joe. He actually was at least wanting to move back to Italy, which is where is his home country. Bob used to stay in touch with them, and I think he and I have talked about it. Unless something very recently has happened, we've just sort of lost touch with Joe.
Well, the last message I got from him was probably going on a year ago, where he said, I did it, I'm moving. Here's my Patreon account. See you down the road. And that was it. Never heard another word.
And Alicia, that doesn't mean that we couldn't find him or that he doesn't have an internet wherever he's at. We just haven't been in touch. And so, anyway, well, everybody, we appreciate you being here. Again, most of you are going to be watching this as a replay. We always appreciate anything that you would give back to us. Alicia then ends this saying, thanks, peace. Thank you, Alicia. And that relates to a statement we used to make a lot back in that 68 to 72 period. And we meant it. I mean, and I wish we would do way more of that today. But anyway, everybody, thanks for being here. Bob, thank you for taking your time away from the tournament. And who ended up winning the game? I didn't even finish that, watching in the background, that Alabama game. It was so out of control. So who ended up winning whatever you were watching there in the background?
I'm watching right now in Arizona. It's only up 3 points with 5 minutes to go against Princeton.
Gosh, I bet they were favored by more than that, weren't they? So that would have been.
It was like 11.5 from what my friends were saying.
Yeah.
Everybody I know went to U of A, so.
Yeah. Well, everybody, have a great rest of your week. Mark, tell us what our next webinar is. We're doing at least a couple from now. Yeah, and I think that's the week after next. That's why I said next week. I think our only live one we have scheduled right now is this one that we do on Thursday, and then our replay. Yeah. So, well, we'll see everybody later. Have a great rest of your week and great days. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.